So good afternoon and welcome to this live discussion forum. It's coming to you courtesy of Parents Magazine and the Kenya Bankers Association. And in the next about 25 or 30 minutes, we are going to be discussing matters to do with money and digital safety. And with me here is Dr. Habil Olaka. He's the CEO of the Kenya Bankers Association. And before I bring him in to just say hi to us, the Kenya Bankers Association has an initiative that it has been running since the year 2013. It's called the Kaa Chonjo Card Mobile and Online Safety Awareness Campaign, and it is geared towards helping consumers like you and myself to just, keep safe as we send money and, receive money on our online, banking platforms. And I would like to invite all of us to, just engage, ask any questions that you may have, and we shall be able to tackle them. So Dr. Habil, say hi to us.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, as I've been introduced, my name is Habil Olaka, and I'm the CEO of the Kenya Bankers Association. And the Kenya Bankers Association, in partnership with other partners, we are carrying out this Kaa Chonjo campaign, which is an annual activity that we have been carrying on since 2011. So we have had it for quite some bit of time. This is almost 10 years since we began the campaign.
Wow, thank you very much. So I would like to start us off. I would like for you to just, give us a brief picture of what progress the campaign has been able to achieve since the time it was launched.
Yes, thank you very much. As I mentioned, this campaign was launched in 2011. And so in 2021, we are more or less doing our 11th annual campaign. And if I recall, when we began in 2011, the main concern at that point in time was, of course, just the ATM, because that was the main point of contact that customers had with the banking sector outside of the banking hall. And so the main one was to provide consumers with safety tips on how to ensure that their money is secure when they're transacting with the bank on the ATM. Now, subsequent to that, as the consumer tastes changed and as needs of customers changed and banks became more innovative to meet the needs of the consumer, of course, other payment platforms came into place. And as those payment platforms come into place, there is more vulnerability. And therefore, our campaign was also shifting in line with the changing consumer needs and customer satisfaction coming from the banks. So for example, online transacting, we now had to also incorporate within our campaign. Things like, for example, mobile banking, which has picked up quite significantly in Kenya. It became an aspect that we had to incorporate within our campaign. And recently, in view of the COVID-19, where there was a concerted effort by both the banking sector and the regulator to try to move transactions away from the banking hall, where the possible physical contact with cash was being minimized, and therefore transactions being pushed onto the digital platforms, not only to secure the consumer, but also to ensure that the consumer can be able to transact effectively, even when they are not able to move from their place of abode. And so banks also quickly moved onto the digital platforms. And so we see the digital platforms are becoming very popular and very effective in terms of engaging or facilitating the banks to engage their customers. And therefore, the campaign has got also to address that, because it becomes a point of vulnerability where the customer, not aware of some of the necessary security measures, may become vulnerable to cybersecurity or people who may want to access illegally the customer's cash in the account.
Right, and talking about COVID-19, because there has been a marked increase of people who are migrating from traditional methods of banking to the digital transactions. And I tend to believe that once that happens, there's also an evolution of the threats that people face. So what are the current threats that people face in regards to security and banking?
Yes, you are right in the sense that we have seen, especially with the COVID-19, we have seen a dramatic transition from purely consumers consuming banking services in the banking halls and so to say with the brick and mortar contact, and then moving on to the digital platforms. And for instance, there was a survey that was done by the Boston Consulting Group, which showed that about 90% of the customers are actually doing more digital banking, especially during this COVID period. And of those, there was an interesting revelation where 70% of those were actually going to remain on the digital platforms even after COVID has abated. And what that means is that a number of our customers have shifted onto digital platforms and they'll not come back. They will remain there. And therefore, it's incumbent upon us to ensure that their safety is guaranteed even when they remain on the digital platforms. So the banks have therefore invested quite a bit in terms of ensuring that the platforms are secure, but also it's incumbent upon us as the Bankers Association and in terms of engaging or rather ensuring that the consumers are provided with the necessary tips to ensure that as they transact on these digital platforms, they are as secure as they were when they were transacting on the, using the brick and mortar, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so what are the challenges that you are currently addressing at the moment?
So yeah, and so therefore the shift from the banking hall into onto the digital platforms has also generated its own areas of vulnerability. So, for example, one of the threats that we are seeing becoming quite evident is crooks essentially using social engineering. And by social engineering, we mean, for example, sending phishing emails to consumers, having bait links where a consumer is then made to believe that you are getting onto something of benefit. And meanwhile, as you get in, they're harvesting information about yourself and about your account that they can use then to access your account. So for example, some of them can even be SMSs on your phone. You get an SMS that seems to indicate that you have won something or you have been lucky to get something. And in order to access the benefit, you may need to provide some information. And at that point in time, they're actually trying to harvest information on how to access your account. They can even sometimes make calls, direct calls on your phone where you are indicated as Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so or so-and-so. You had been entered into this program and you happen to be a winner of this campaign. And for us to transfer the money into your account,
okay, I'm sorry, you're breaking. I don't know whether it's on your side or it's mine.
Yes, so could I just go through the example I was giving where somebody gives a call? Is that where I broke off? Hello? So I was explaining the...
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I'm very sorry about that. I think there was an issue with the internet. Yeah, so we left off where we were talking about the current challenges that the campaign is trying to, to address as regards to security and digital transactions. And if I recall, you mentioned something to do with social engineering. And I would like to know, because I realized when I was doing my research that the campaign is also helping bank employees to, detect and contain any kind of attack that comes in. But then I'm also wondering, what are you doing on your part to ensure that even the employees that are handling my money as the consumer can be trusted, because they can as easily just, obtain my information through fraudulent means and use it to, steal my money. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things is that we have taken quite a bit of effort in securing the banks themselves, in terms of ensuring that their systems are secure. So there are adequate controls to ensure that internally it's much more difficult for fraud to be generated from within. Now, there is more vulnerability in the customer exposing himself or herself to an external agent that may use or may trick the customer to be able to access the customer's account or access the customer's account information for that matter. But back to your question, just to give you some bit of assurance in terms of what has been done internally. There are quite a number of controls that have been put in place. For instance, ensuring that the system is as secure as possible. So any attempt to tamper, there are controlling messages that will go around and somebody will be able to see that something unusual is happening internally. Then there is another aspect of it, which is what we call the Know Your Employee campaign. Rather than Know Your Customer, which is well known by the consumer, we now have what we call Know Your Employee. So before you onboard an employee, you'll have done quite a number of character checks to ensure that the employee is not likely to be compromised once he is employed and is given sensitive responsibilities within the banking. And then even after that, we also have the double checking amongst the staff. So one would do something, but there is another controlling element whereby somebody else counter checks what the other employee has done. And that minimizes the probability of an employee using information that he may have come across to actually enter into a customer's account and be able to commit fraud. So from the bank's perspective, I think there are fairly comfortable safeguards that have been put in place. The main worry is the customer who will fall prey to tricks that have been put in by fraudsters, either physically trying to access when the customer is, for example, trying to use the various controls, password or PIN or something. They will try to access that information through using tricks on the customer. And once they have that information, they can then use it to access the customer's account. And the only security you have against accessing your account is those credentials for accessing it. So you either your PIN or your password or something. And what we try to do is to ensure that that password is of such format that it cannot easily be copied by somebody, or is of a nature that keeps changing so that you are in control of it, so that should somebody accidentally have gotten access to it, your frequent changing will ensure that the person does not have access to the new password that you have changed to. So those kinds of controls are the ones that we put in place to ensure that the customer is always ahead and the amount, and is always in control, so that his cash is as secure as he himself practices the safety controls that you have put in place.
All right, thank you very much. And speaking about the customer putting themselves at risk, by certain things that they do or do not do, is there a specific group of people that is most vulnerable to this kind of attacks?
Yes, there are some specific categories of people who may be specifically vulnerable. And one is the fact that just the mere exposure in terms of being in contact with the rest of the world, so to speak. So that would mean that the Mama Mboga or the person who is not quite exposed in terms of the digital communication may not be able to get some of this information. And therefore, that person becomes specifically vulnerable in the event that we are giving out these tips and information and that person is not accessible to it. That is one. And then the other one is a specific category of people, the people with disabilities, who have got some very specific challenges and specific needs that more often than not, when you're designing your products, you do not take them into consideration. And so they may inadvertently expose themselves because I'll just give an example. Supposing you have got an ATM that is not placed in a position whereby somebody with a disability cannot be able to reach. So it's placed high up there where the person cannot be able to reach. The only way that person can access that service is by getting help from another person. Now, it is that getting help from another person that exposes this person to, the vulnerability of being exposed, because that other additional person is the one who can easily create a weakness in the system to be able to defraud the customer. Or a customer who, for example, is visually impaired, in which case you have got to have an alternative way of getting the customer to transact on your platforms. So either we'll be using somebody with the vision to be able to transact for the customer, and that creates vulnerability. So one of the things we have done, particularly this year, is to ensure that our campaign is taking into consideration such vulnerable people who are vulnerable by virtue of their condition, either because they are disabled and therefore the access to our platforms may be challenged or may require some specific needs. And those specific needs create vulnerability that we need to be conscious of. And as we are designing the platforms, we actually take that into consideration. Yeah.
Right, and it's I like the fact that you brought up the issue of people that are able differently, because somebody had asked a question and they wanted to know, how does the campaign factor in the needs of people with disabilities?
Yeah, a little bit earlier in the year, we launched, there's a study that was carried out by the KBE, and we're trying to get how the banks can be able to be supported to address the specific needs of the people with special needs. And that's why, for example, this year, the campaign has got a number of partners, some of them from, representing people with different abilities. And therefore, we have decided that this year we are going to launch our campaign that specifically addresses the needs of these specific people. So for example, people who are visually impaired will normally have some very specific requirements in terms of accessing the digital platforms. People who are physically impaired may also have some specific requirements in terms of, or rather needs in terms of being able to access our digital platforms. Now, those specific needs occasionally create vulnerabilities that are not similar to the vulnerabilities of the able-bodied people. And therefore, as we launch this campaign, we need to ensure that we have actually incorporated the specific needs of these unique consumers. And that's why we then incorporate the specific associations or interest groups that would specifically be able to help us design our products with taking into consideration the specific needs of these vulnerable consumers.
All right, and take for instance, somebody has had the unfortunate experience of having their money taken away from them by a fraudster. Are there any measures to help such people retrieve their money?
Yeah, and that's normally a very unfortunate situation, because what then normally happens is that it's either the bank itself either takes responsibility for what has happened because it happened on their platform, and it was something that was not a mistake by the consumer, in which case then the bank would take responsibility, reimburse the amount, and then pursue the criminal for recovery of the amount. Yeah. Now, but there are some unfortunate cases whereby, because of the lack of knowledge by the consumer or lack of exposure, sometimes the consumer puts himself or herself in the way of these criminals. So, for example, you get a phishing email, and then you go and click on it, partly because you believed that you could actually win a lottery from nowhere, and you have got some given amount that you are being told that you have won, and therefore they need to deposit into your account. And you honestly believe that that person is genuinely trying to get information about your account so that the money can be put into your account. And you go ahead and release this information to the fraudster. Now, at that point in time, it's normally difficult for the bank to take responsibility because you willingly did provide the information to the fraudster. And that's why this campaign then comes into place, so that we can give the consumers those tips, those messages of advice within the campaign that ensures that you cannot fall prey to such tricks that will always be there, either via email, via SMS messages that you get, via all the various digital platforms. They are all over. And therefore, if you are conscious and you are aware of the possible vulnerabilities, then you'll always be secure because you will not fall prey to any of them.
Yeah. All right. And during the launch of this year's campaign, I noticed that most of the speakers really called for cross-sector collaborations to at least handle the challenges that are still in existence. So I would like to know what are some of these challenges that you feel that as the Kenya Bankers Association, you might not be able to handle by yourselves unless you get some other partners coming in across the sectors.
Yeah, there are quite a number. Some of them can be handled by the banks themselves as providers of the service, but some of them require collaborating with the other partners. Because if you look at, for example, the payment ecosystem, there is a regulation bit of it where there might need to be policies or guidelines that come in to ensure that the players within the ecosystem are safeguarded. And that's why, for example, this year, and actually it has been for quite a bit of time, we have always had the Communications Authority as a regulator coming on board. We have always had the central bank, for example, coming on board because that is the regulator of the national payment system within the country. We have also mentioned about the fact that there are some people with specific needs that need to be considered. And we have talked about the various elements of being able in different ways. So, for example, we have got the Kenya Society for the Blind that has been incorporated within the campaign to enable us collaborate and get solutions for those who are visually impaired. Then we have got the Association for the Physically Disabled in Kenya, where somebody may be physically disabled, and this association helps us ensure that as we prepare or as we innovate on the products, we come up with products that address their specific needs. Then you have got, for example, the consumers. The consumers could be, at the retail end, and therefore we have got, for example, the Retail Traders Association of Kenya, the so-called RETRAC, that is also a member of our campaign, an associate of the campaign. And we have been having this campaign with them for quite some bit of time, because if you look at it from the retail end, most of the consumption will be done at that end, and the payments will normally be done at the retail end. So there's a necessity for us to collaborate with them to ensure that the system is well safeguarded. Then there's a Consumer Grassroots Association, again, just ensuring that we have got contact with the ultimate consumer and taking into consideration the specific challenges and needs of the consumer to bring it into the design of the products and in terms of design of the security system that we have. We have got the other payment service providers, like, for example, the schemes. And by this, we mean, for example, the Visa or MasterCard, for that matter, who are also part of the campaign, ensuring that the various platforms that are used for effecting payment are secure. So we have got the collaboration between the banks and the card companies in terms of effecting the payment, and that comes in quite significantly. And then finally, there is Pesalink. Pesalink is a platform that is owned by the banks, and it enables funds to be transferred from account to account on any of the online platforms, including the mobile, including at the ATM, over the counter, internet banking, whichever way. And therefore, Pesalink is a critical link into this campaign to ensure that all stakeholders and all parties are brought into the campaign.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. And I would like to acknowledge the presence of a few people that have joined us. We have Aidi Owala. Thank you very much for joining us. We also have Veronica Muthoni Ngumi, and we have Gladys Karaoke. We have Harriet Ogayo. We have Joe. We have MC Miracle. He says, thank you, girl. He's learning a lot. Thank you very much for tuning in, MC Miracle. And we have also Joe M. Joe. Keep commenting. You can also keep sharing, you can keep sharing with your friends so that they also get to learn a lot from this broadcast. So back to you, Dr. Olaka. You have mentioned some of the partners that you're working with, and maybe just out of curiosity, because I have heard you mention about 1 or 2 international partners. Do you have any other international partners that you're working with? Because the more the professional landscape keeps changing and people are being enabled to work even for people that are overseas, is the more that people become vulnerable to attacks from even overseas. So do you have partners that you're working with from overseas outside of Kenya?
Well, actually, I think broadly speaking, there are quite a number of partners that are engulfed into this campaign. If you look at it from the Kenya Bankers Association itself, we have got specific partners whom we partner with at the specific, because this campaign is an annual campaign. So there would be some specific partners that would come and have specifically identified and therefore formally on the roster for the partnership. But the partnerships are also between the banks and their respective, partners. So they would also be having, campaigns to secure their respective platforms. Some of them could be bilateral, some of them could be beyond being bilateral, but there are several partners who must come into the whole ecosystem to ensure that the campaign is purely to safeguard the safety of the consumer, and banks are just one of the players. But there are many players, as we have identified. There's a regulatory bit of it where you bring in the policy. There is the consumer bit of it. There is the platform providers within the ecosystem of the payment ecosystem. So the number of partners are many. It's just an issue of identifying, for example, in a particular year, we could decide that for purposes of this campaign, we could go with, say, Visa. But we know that with Visa, there is also MasterCard, there are others. And so in the next year, we could go with MasterCard. But it means that in the whole card ecosystem, we are going with them as partners over the period. So 1 year, for example, we could have the Communications Authority coming out quite clearly. And another year, we could have the Central Bank coming in quite clearly. But either way, we know that we have got the regulators on our side as part of the campaign.
Okay, so as we come to a close of the interview, I have gotten a question here from a member of the audience, somebody who is watching us live, and they are asking, should the bank refund my money if I'm defrauded? Because this person feels like it's their fault because he did not give his PIN to anyone. So they feel like the system of the bank is not secure. And so they want to know, in such a case, should the bank refund them their money?
Yeah, as I had mentioned earlier, that if actually there is no evidence of the fact that you did not, through your own carelessness, release information, and therefore what you're trying to assert is the fact that there was carelessness on the part of the bank, then the bank is obligated to refund you the money. I think the challenge comes when how to prove that actually you did not disclose your account, because it's possible for somebody to be able to go through the system and check how that person did access your account. If that person has got, for example, your PIN and has got your the other credentials for access, the question would be that how did the customer get access to those credentials? Mark you, the PIN is not shared by the bank. The bank does not know your PIN. They give you the open system where you are then supposed to change your PIN along the line as you go to ensure that it's only known to you and is only available to you. Now, more often than not, we try to put this PIN on we save it somewhere. Now, that PIN, or you could even share it with your most trusted person, who might be, say, your son or your maid. Now, you think that that's very safe. However, that same person is the one who could now use your PIN to access your account. In a case like that, it will be very difficult for the bank to take responsibility when it is an action on your part that has led to your credentials being exposed and therefore being used fraudulently to access your account. So to answer your question, if it is the responsibility of the bank and there was no part played by the customer, the bank will usually reimburse the money. However, they need to be assured, they need to do the necessary investigation to assure themselves that it was vulnerability on their part and not the carelessness of the customer.
All right, thank you very, very much. I believe that person has been answered, and I'd just like to acknowledge the presence of a few more people and then give you a chance to give us your parting shot. So Idea Wala says the forum is very informative and she loves the questions that you're discussing. And then there's also Nuru Mugambi who says, good point about international partners and their role in instilling confidence in international payments. Thank you very much for all those comments that are coming in. So Dr. Olaka, what is your parting shots?
I think mine is to encourage, this campaign has been going on since the beginning of the month, and is to encourage consumers who are listening to us to just simply use the hashtag secure your banking. And you'll then be able to get all the messages that have been streamlined on this campaign. So don't miss anything, just use the hashtag secure your banking, and you should be able to get all the information that we have given here and any other information that has been shared across during this campaign.
All right, thank you very much, sir, for taking time to be with us to discuss matters to do with financial security. We appreciate very much. And thank you also to all our viewers that tuned in. Remember, the hashtag is secure your banking, and then you can be able to transact freely without being worried that your money is getting lost. So till next time, have a good evening and transact safely using the secure banking hashtag. Thank you very much.
Let's do the meeting.